Yesterday I got a phone call, and it was from somebody that lives in upstate New York. And he also has a home, he and his wife also have a home in Golden Gate Estates in Naples, Florida. So if you're unfamiliar, a lot of people think of Naples, Florida as kind of just the downtown area. But if you drive inland a little bit, there's an area, you're going to cross over 951 essentially, which is also called Collier Boulevard. So you're going to cross over that, and into that area it becomes obviously more rural. And that is the area where you're not going to see an HOA. There's really big lots, people that don't want the rules and regulations, people that want to run a business out of their home. Maybe they have a landscaping company, something along those lines, or maybe just somebody that wants a big garden. I've had people do shooting ranges, put up pole barns, put up a 6-car garage. You can get an acre, 5 acres, 10 acres. So you can get acreage in Naples, in the Naples area, and the farther out you go, the more acreage becomes less expensive. You do have to be aware of uplands versus wetlands, but that is a completely different topic. Let's go back to this gentleman, I'll call him Adam, who called me yesterday regarding his property in Golden Gate Estates. So he got a call from his neighbor, and his neighbor said, "You know, Adam, I was just kind of wondering, I know you've had guests at the house, but do you realize that your guests are up all hours in the night, they're playing music, your pool looks awful. I took a walk over there yesterday just to do a little peeking, I hope you don't mind, and there is people literally sleeping in the lounge chairs, in your lanai, in your pool. I mean, I'm just making sure that you know who these folks are." Well, Adam lost his mind. So Adam called the police. The police went out to his house. They knocked on the door. Of course, no one would answer. And it took that full month to get to the point where they could make contact with anyone and say, "Look, you need to show a lease. You need to show proof that you can be here." Essentially, what happened was that Adam had squatters in his property. So what is a squatter? Let's talk about that for a minute, and what can you do about it if that happens to you. So a squatter is somebody that basically eyes your property and they know that you're not there. It's vacant, there is no HOA, and they essentially just take possession of it. Now you might say, well, wait a minute, what if they're breaking and entering? How can that not be illegal? Well, once they take possession, and keep in mind, his house is furnished. It's destroyed now. He sent me the pictures. It's absolutely, his furnishings just need to be thrown out. But once they take possession, it was, up until July 2024, near impossible to get those folks out. Near impossible. You literally had to go through an entire eviction process, and it was very, very difficult. And if someone in the process of doing that pulls a bankruptcy, you could have people in your house for 3 years, and there's not a lot you can do about it. You have to go through the legal process. So I want to make you aware, because this recently came up, let's jump onto this legal website that I like to reference. So the reason I'm bringing this up is that there is a new-ish law. This came into effect in July of 2024, and it's called, it's a bill. It's the House Bill 621 law, enhancing property owner protections against squatters. So first off, we'll just go with what they say here about squatting. Squatting occurs when someone occupies a property without the owner's permission. This situation can arise with properties that are abandoned, vacant, or even well maintained, which is exactly what happened in Adam's case. Squatters may enter and settle during an owner's absence. If the occupation goes unaddressed, squatters could legally claim ownership of the property through adverse possession. Can you believe that? Did you know that? And that is the case in a lot of states, by the way, not just Florida. So in Florida, adverse possession laws allow someone to claim ownership rights after living on and maintaining the property including paying taxes, for 7 continuous years. So you might say, how could somebody be there for 7 years? Well, what if the owner is in Canada or Germany or somewhere where they're having trouble? It's happened before when people are coming from England, out just anywhere out of the country. So let's talk about what happened before House Bill 621. So we'll jump to this section right here. Slow and complicated evictions, I agree with that. I personally owned a foreclosure company for years, and it's difficult. Exploitation of legal loopholes. Squatters could use adverse possession laws to their advantage, making it difficult for the owners to act quickly. That's very, very true. And as I mentioned about bankruptcy, if someone files bankruptcy, it becomes almost impossible because you can't reach out to them. And then, of course, it's a financial strain on the owners because the onus is on them to get the folks out, even though the people are there legally. So the changes introduced by the HB 621, immediate action by law enforcement. Property owners can now involve law enforcement to quickly remove squatters once they prove ownership and unauthorized occupation. That's how this owner was able to do that, but it did take a month. And when they say prove ownership, and this is the key, unauthorized occupation, that it's kind of hard to prove that somebody can't do something. And that's still a challenge I find when this happens to people. So most cities are seeing a decline in value. Short sales are on the rise. Foreclosures are on the rise. So when properties become vacant, that's when they're definitely vulnerable for these things to happen. And this is where a lot of people ask for the lock and leave situation because their assumption is that if they're behind a gate and somebody has to get through a guard at the gate or if they have to figure out the code to get in, it's just enough deterrence to not do something like that. Now it's not going to preclude this from happening. It does happen in gated communities, but not nearly as often. Not nearly as often. When you're talking about somewhere where there's no HOA and people are not paying as much attention, especially in an area like Golden Gate or any area where there's acreage, you're far enough away from your neighbor that people are just not going to notice this stuff going on. So if you're on a street where, if you think about Golden Gate, there might be, let's say there's 24 houses on one street. If most of those homes are snowbird-ish, or the owner only shows up January, February, March, and the rest of the time it's left vacant, then you're definitely at risk for a squatter situation. And the best way to avoid that is to make sure you know your neighbors, make sure you make connections with your neighbors and tell them, look, here's the time we're there. If anybody's on this property, please call me or call the police. So that's one level of security you can have there. And the other thing you can do is get a good, trustworthy home watch company. And that's where you're paying somebody to go to your house twice a month, once a month, to check on it and make sure these things aren't going on, because they absolutely do happen. I've shown property in Golden Gate where we're driving down the road and there was literally tents on a property. I had a buyer who was coming from way out of the state, and we were checking on the property time to time because she was in escrow. She had equitable interest in that property. So we were checking on it for her, and there was one day that we went there and there were people in her front yard. Now think about it, this is 3 acres, so the front yard's big, but right there towards the front of the property, they had a car parked on our property. They were sleeping in the back of the car, and there was like a small tent set up. So of course we called the police, and the police did run them off, but these things do happen. I don't tell you these things to scare you. I'm telling you this because the laws are leaning more towards the owner of the property, thank goodness, now, to get squatters out of there, but it's something you should definitely be aware of.